Hello, everyone. This is Boomer Life Lessons and Stories, and I'm Dr. Ron here with another episode that hopefully will be informative, if not entertaining. So, what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to be talking about Fomo and the silver conundrum. But before we get there, if you could, please like, share, and subscribe. I'd like to say, before we go into our episode and the story I'm about to tell, I'd like to not only let you know how appreciative I am you being on this journey with me, but I wanted to thank you. We're getting ready to start this episode number 50. So that's a major milestone for us, and we're looking for the next 50 after that. If you enjoy the things that we have to say and share with you in our lessons and the stories, if that's adding value to you and very helpful to you, then we're doing our job, right? So with that, what am I talking about? FOMO and the silver conundrum. Well, FOMO, if you can see in the title, it's somewhere here. I'm sure that Miss Boomer is putting it maybe over there, maybe it's over here, up in this corner. FOMO stands for fear of missing out. That is something that drives a lot of people. And perhaps this good old boy here has done that as well in the past. But what we try to do is not let ourselves be driven by emotion. So that is truly an emotion, fear, and it's always with us. Typically, we look at our lives and we look at the major milestones and we think critically about the things that we're getting ready to do for our career, for ourselves, for our family. And we hope to make the very best decision possible so that our family going forward is better off than they were yesterday. And as you've heard me say many, many, many times before, it is naturally all about the family and, of course, yourself. So, we're already hyped up a bit. And what would I say that? Well, we've been in this going on a year now. Actually, it has been a little over a year. We've been in this COVID environment, and a lot of people, their nerves are on edge. They're emotionally driven because they want to get things back to normal. We like that comfort zone. We don't like the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. What's tomorrow going to be like? Is it going to be good for us? Is it going to be bad for us? Do we need to go out to the grocery store because we might be exposed to COVID? Do we need to go socialize? It's been said by a lot of anthropologists and other researchers that the human animal is a social type animal that thrives on the engagement with others. And I know in my personal life, when I'm engaging with others, I feel invigorated. I feel like it's all worthwhile. But when I'm by myself, I do appreciate the moments of quiet and contemplation. But there's only so much of that that you need. And afterwards, you begin to feel like you're missing out, right? So typically, when we look at the environment and how it set our emotions on edge, and then coming out of a very contentious campaign time and election, people are kind of up in opposition with this or that. Now, I'm not going to go into politics or religion. Those are areas that are very personal, and I think those are best dealt with in conversations when people talk one-on-one with one another in a very respectful and dignified way. But having said that, you can look across the landscape in the United States and elsewhere in the world, and people are a little on edge. And therefore, in some extent, maybe perhaps to a greater extent than in the past, the decision making that's going on is emotionally driven, right? So when we make decisions based on emotion and that raw edge that we all find ourselves in perhaps today, the decision making can be somewhat irrational. And we might not have thought through all that should be thought through about it. So emotion can drive our decision making, causing us to actually base our decisions purely on something that we hope to happen, but not based on the facts on the ground. In other words, we don't take the time to interrogate the facts. We don't take the time to understand what the context is. And we'll get back to that in a moment. I think perhaps what might be helpful at this point in time, and we're eventually going to wind ourselves back around to the silver conundrum, what's going out in the market space today. But before we go there, I'm going to share my screen if I can find it. So this is from Penn State. It's Psych 256, and it's the Cognitive Psychology FA 16-002. This is an article, or really Q's and A's, about the effects of fear on decision making. And I'd like to only read through the first couple of paragraphs, but I strongly encourage that you read the entire string of questions and answers. So here we go. After a tumultuous election year and the results it has now created, the one common factor that influenced many people into their choices was fear. Fear of what the world would be like under the other candidate. Fear of what the future will hold if that person becomes president. This fear of the unknown has long been tapped by both politicians and businesses to drive our decision-making into what they are selling. However, prior to a decision, we often overrate the negative impact that decision will have on us. This negative thinking is often not how we actually feel after the decision has been made. In other words, we have had time to think more clearly about it, perhaps in a less emotional state, and we realize perhaps we were driven too much by emotion in that decision making. It continues. Why is fear so important? Why is it really ingrained in the human condition? Because it is an emotion that protects us from negative events. Fear exists in various aspects of our lives. Every time we get in the car, a part of us is scared to get in an accident and be seriously hurt or killed. I mean, that goes through people's mind all the time. I remember driving in the car with my grandfather and grandmother, and of course they were driving. I was like 6 or 7 years old, and every time a car would speed by us, my grandfather would say, "There goes death." And my grandmother, of course, got all over him. And of course, I asked him, I said, "Well, why are you saying that, Grandpa?" And he said, "Well, it could swerve in and have some catastrophic results of people going in the opposite direction." So people think like that, whether good or bad. Maybe that wasn't such a good lesson to be teaching a 7 or 8-year-old at the time, but it was said, and I remember it. And of course, I do take my precautions when I drive because I don't want to be hurt or seriously hurt or killed or kill others in my carelessness. It continues. This emotion that dictates how we drive. Do we recognize it, stare it in the face and say, "Oh, well, you only live once"? Or do we drive so cautiously that the other drivers around us become angry and frustrated with our lack of risk taking? For most, it's a balance between these two extremes. You can be too cautious and impede the good flow of traffic, or you can be less cautious and careless and endanger yourselves and others. That's the two extremes. The emotion of fear brings about the attention to be cautious and observant prior to any decision making, and that's pretty key. Once all the risks are analyzed, and that too is very key, we then move forward with a decision. Sometimes that process is quick, and sometimes it's antagonizingly long, right? When we don't know the risk, our fear can often lead us away from rational thought. And that's really the point here. It's this pathway that leads us to make decisions from a purely emotional perspective. Now I'm going to stop the share. So, I mean, really what they're saying in this question and reply type scenario from Penn State is that sometimes when we're driven by emotion, we're not thinking rationally. We're not practicing good critical thinking. Okay. So now what does that mean to us in terms of what's going on in the commodities market? Well, basically what it's happening is that most of the metal sellers, the silver dealers, stopped selling their silver bars and coins. This was on Sunday, and they were wanting to wait to see what happens in the market, because there's some fear that some of the same sorts of things that happened with GameStop is going to happen in the commodities market, especially with silver. So they didn't want to sell yesterday their stock, and today it's going for twice of what it was going yesterday. And obviously people are hyped up. They're not wanting to miss out. There's this huge fear of missing out, of making a quick dollar or two, rather than thinking through the investment process. What is the context that we're in? How does it play against the facts? How do we interpret the facts on the ground? How does those facts within the context affect us as individuals and our family based on the decisions we're about to make or perhaps want to make? So, literally, this FOMO, fear of missing out, will drive a lot of people into the market to buy perhaps silver bars and coins in large quantities without purely thinking it through. There's this concept. I had a friend. He was a collector of stamps, right? Very unique stamps, and he built this really nice collection of certain specialized stamps. And he said, Ron, you know what you do with your collection? You build it first, then you write the book and publish it and get it out to the masses, create a stir about the collection and the stamps in that collection. And then, you know what you do? And I said, no, what? He said, you sell your collection. What's that called? Pump and dump. You hype it up, build up this emotional charge out in the masses, provide whatever it is that the hype is all about, and sell into that hype, into that demand created by the hype. And then you go off on your merry way with whatever you've earned in that pump and dump. Now, I'm not saying that the silver, the spot price of silver is going up based upon hyping and pumping so that somebody else can dump. I mean, that does happen in the market space, even with stocks. People get out there and sing the praises of stocks that are not doing so well, hoping that they'll generate some interest and people will invest in those stocks. And when the price goes up, they'll sell whatever their holdings were. You can't do that in a collusion. If you do that, that's against the law, basically. But you can get involved in the excitement of something that's happening that may be a shift in the paradigm. It may be a shift in the commodities market. Something that was well underpriced is now being realized in terms of the growth in its price, that it's going to where it should be. Now, whatever that is, I don't know. I don't have the answers. All I'm trying to say in this particular episode of Boomer Life Lessons and Stories is simply this. The idea is to buy low and sell high, right? But where is the height to which it's going? Is it $30 a share? Is the spot price of silver going to $50 a share? There are some ultimate astronomically, how can I say this? There are some people that say that the spot price is going to $1,000 per ounce of silver. Now, that's a bit extreme, but whether or not it goes to its previous high of $50 an ounce could very well be. You just don't know. It could go back to $8 or $9 as well after the hype on it, the pump, and then the dump. You just don't know. What you need to do as an individual is first determine, do you have the spare funds to invest? And can you afford to lose those funds? Think about that. If you can afford to lose that amount of money and it's not going to hurt you or your family financially, and you're looking for an opportunity to make an educated investment, interrogate the facts. And that's a key word, interrogate. You look at the facts, you interrogate them in the context, and actively looking and asking the questions, is this movement going to extend and last for a longer period of time than just a pump and dump. Pump today, dump tomorrow. If it is, it might be something that you want to invest in. And then you determine what is right for you in terms of the size of the investment associated with the risk. Remember, most stockbrokers will tell you the past performance is not indicative of the future performance of this investment, whatever it is. Also realize that silver does not pay a dividend like stock does. Now, I'm not advocating stock over silver, and I'm not advocating silver over stock. What I'm trying to get you to do is to think clearly about what's going to happen. The GameStop stock, kind of hard to say. I think it went upwards to about $500 per share when it was hyped up. It went down to 150. It crashed. Where's the real value of that stock? It's hard to say right now. Presently, I think it's somewhere around 340, 350. Will it go back up? I don't know. Will it go down? Could very well do. Where are you in that investment if you did buy that stock? If you bought it at $50 a share, you're sitting pretty good. When do you sell? Well, that's a good question. How far up does the investment have to go before you realize it's now a good time to capture part of that run? Turn that investment into dollars. Now, there's going to be lots of people who are bought into the silver community, and they will tell you that silver is the real money, and the fiat money that the government puts out, the dollar bills, is just meaningless pretty much. I'm not going to get into that. I do know that currency is a store of value. It makes economic transactions very easy. You don't have to go off and do some work for the plumber just because you want the plumber to come in to do some work for you. You pay that plumber with dollars, and that plumber then goes on to the next job. You work to earn money, currency. You translate that effort into that currency, and then it stores the value of your effort, and then you use that value to pay for other things, and it makes it very easy to do so. So what do you do? Really, that's the question. What do you do after you've gone and done the investigation? You've looked at the industry, the silver industry. You've looked at the supply and demand. You look at what is being used in industry, like in the solar panel industry and in other sorts of industries, like in the electronics. And you determine, is there enough supply or a shortage of supply? And if there's a shortage, logic would say that it's going to go up in price. It's supply and demand if it's left to its own mechanisms. And then based on all your research and the funds and the risk that you're going to be okay with, you decide to either invest or not invest. So that's what it is. Don't base your decisions on FOMO. Don't be a FOMO. Don't be one who is basing his or her decision on the fear of being left out, of missing out. The fear of missing out can cause great damage to you because you're making decisions by emotion and not thinking critically. And truly, that's what it's all about. Think critically and you're going to be okay. And with that, my friends, this person who is always interested in what is going on in the commodities and stock markets is going to go do his own research and think things through before he reacts or acts. And with that, you take care of your family, and be careful out there. All the best.